Hello, I'm the Dark Master. Welcome back to my video game reviews. In today's video, we shall be covering the 11th game in the Kirby franchise and the 5th mainline Kirby game in the series. Kirby's Dream Land 3, or as known in Japan, Hoshi no Kabi 3. Does it take all the lessons learned from Kirby Superstar in order to become a game that is better in every way? No, not really, but let's get into it, starting with that good trove of neat trivia, the game's developmental history. Alright, so this game was alongside Kirby's Dream Land 2, which I've already reviewed before, so check that video out if you are interested, and Kirby 64 The Crystal Shards, which I shall review in time, was directed not by Masahiro Sakurai, but rather by the mysterious Shinichi Shinamura, for which we know very little about. I mean, frankly, the man could be dead for all we know, though all his games did have a distinctive feeling to them, separate from the others. Other notable staff members included Satoru Iwata as the chief producer, Jun Ishikawa as the sound producer, Tetsuya Notoyora as the illustrator, and Teruyuki Gumji as chief programmer. The development of Kirby's Dream Land 3 went relatively smoothly, with the game utilizing a pseudo-high-resolution technique that allowed it to blend pixels for an effect we will discuss later in this video when I get to the graphics. The game was released this time first in North America, surprisingly enough, on November 27, 1997, and later in Japan on March 27, 1998. Sadly, due to issues involving the conversion onto the PAL region, it was never released in Australia and Europe. Due to this, despite getting a fairly positive reception, it didn't sell all that well, being the only mainline Kirby game to sell less than 1 million copies, with only 76 copies being sold in the US. Regardless of how poorly it sold, though, let us now go into the game itself and see whether it's solid or deserves its lack of success, starting with, as always, the story of the game. Alright, so this game opens on another peaceful day in Dreamland, where we see Kirby is fishing with Gooey, when suddenly an ominous, mysterious dark cloud arrives and breaks the rings around planet Popstar, possessing any who come into contact, including the petty tyrant deity. Deciding to do something after being informed by Coo the Owl of what's going on, Kirby, Gooey, the animal friends from Kirby's Dream Land 2, which are, and include, of course, Coo the Owl, Rick the Hamster, and Kine, the ocean sunfish, alongside a new set of animal friends, set off to save the world. Those new friends being Pitch, which is a warbling white-eye, a species of bird native to Japan, Indonesia, Korea, and the Philippines, Nago the cat, and Choo Choo an octopus. Yes, a lot of people like to make jokes that she doesn't really look a lot like an octopus, but it is based off a specific species that actually does resemble Choo Choo a lot, that being Opisthotuthis depressa, more commonly known as the Japanese flapjack octopus. Together, these 8 allies set out to free the 5 regions of planet Popstar from the influence of this dark cloud. On their adventure, they encounter many people, freeing them from the influence of the Dark Cloud, which includes various natives and strange random people, including Kao, Goku, Donbei, and Hirikari from the game Shin Ogigashima. Rob and Professor Hector, which are a pair of characters credited for helping the NES in its original release success, and even Samus Aran from freaking Metroid. In return for helping them out, they get heart stars. Now, there are two endings depending on if you get all the heart stars or not. Now, if you just play the game normally and don't really care about completion and beat deity, you liberate the area, but the origins of the problem are not really addressed, and you get sort of a bad ending, where an enemy roll call is shown as Kirby and the gang return home, or just depressed, and just saddened. It's very clearly not the actual ending, and ends with a look at dark matter with a question mark. Yeah, pretty clearly not the good ending, but if you decide to do the right thing and help out all these characters, you get to the true ending. And don't worry, I'll go over how to do that later in the video. Doing so, we'll see Kirby and Gooey, if you're playing a two-player, entering into the Dark Cloud, called the Hyper Zone, and fighting dark matter. Then after beating that with the help of the Love Stick, you gotta face the true villain, who is Zero, the one behind it all. Through the power of love, Kirby beats Zero, giving him a bloody death as he's overcome with the power of love, freeing the world from his dark oppression. Overall, it's a pretty solid story. I've heard some people say that it's just a retread from Kirby's Dream Land 2, but I think the fact that Zero is different enough of an entity from the Dark Command Swordsman and shoots blood at you, that honestly, the similarities that do exist are pretty easily forgiven. Now, however, let's go to arguably the most important aspect of any game, the gameplay. Alright, so the basic gameplay is largely the same as Kirby's Superstar. You can move left to right with a D-pad, dash by pressing the, D-pad in the same direction twice, jump with the B button, hover by pressing B again, you suck up by pressing the Y button, and, spit a projectile by pressing the Y button with something in your mouth. Underwater, you do a water gun that you can spit out with pressing Y. You slide by pressing the down on the D-pad and B. You can also drop down in certain platforms and duck using the down D-pad, and enter into a door by pressing up on the D-pad. In order to activate two-player and to summon Gooey, you press A, and he can be controlled either by an honestly pretty dumb AI or, a hopefully somewhat more intelligent second player. He functions like Kirby and can be gotten rid of by another press of the A button. Multiplayer can be fun, but it makes the already easy game even easier, so proceed with caution there if you want any sort of challenge, though. Though there's not really a lot there anyway, but going to the abilities control, here's where you see some changes. Okay, so, well, basically, it's very similar to that scene in Kirby's Dream Land 2. Upon inhaling a copy ability bearing enemy and pressing down on the D-pad, you get an ability, which you can then use by pressing Y. Yeah, if you're excited by the nuanced, complicated movesets introduced in Kirby Superstar, which I've already reviewed if you're interested in learning more, I'm sorry to say we're back to the single button press abilities that were established back in Kirby's Adventure, which I've also reviewed before if you're interested in learning about that. And some would consider that a downgrade, especially since there's only 9 abilities, 2 new and 7 returning. Starting with the returning abilities, there is Burning, which sees Kirby dashing forward as an invincible fireball for a short period of time. Cutter sees Kirby toss a boomerang that acts like a sword, cutting anything it hits. It can be curved upwards slightly, but using the D-pad. Ice allows Kirby to breathe a sort of icy flamethrower, and can also be aimed upwards. And the ice brick that forms from the enemy can then be kicked forwards. Needle allows Kirby to become an immobile ball of spikes. Stone is similar, becoming an invincible stone that can slam down on enemies and roll down hills. Spark sees Kirby create an electric blast around himself that sort of protects him. Paracel allows Kirby to shield himself while crouching, hit enemies from above, and gently float down. Then there are the new abilities, first of which is Cleaning, also called Clean or Broom Kirby. It's a pretty simple ability, as Kirby just sweeps the floor. Outside of some combinations, it's easy to see that this ability was for some reason forgotten, and outside of 2 episodes of the anime, it wouldn't really return as a true ability until Kirby's Star Allies. Oh, and there's also the Love Stick, which basically functions like the Star Rod. It's an end game weapon that Kirby uses to fight Dark Matter and Zero. It's fine. But that's not all. As with the Dreamland 2, you get a set of animal friends that can be combined with the abilities to offer a whole new set of, you know, abilities in this essence. And you can grab or release these friends with the press of the X button and use the ability by the press of the Y. Let us go friend by friend, starting with the old guard. Starting with Ku the Owl. With Burning, Ku can do a sort of fire dive downwards in a diagonal manner that can be quite useful. With ice, the breath Kirby releases is converted into 3 ice crystals, like a machine gun. With spark, he shoots out a lightning bolt, like Thor, down up below the pair, hitting any enemies while flying. Stone sees the duo plummet to the ground, creating shock waves. However, Kirby can be moved slightly around by Ku, which is fascinating to see as it makes up for Stone's greatest weakness. Clean sees Kirby turn Ku into a feather duster that is used to smack foes with. Needle sees Kirby morph into a large set of spikes, very similar to the combination seen in Kirby's Dream Land 2. The same is true for the last two, but they're honestly a downgrade. Cutter sees Ku toss a single feather that honestly lacks the coverage of the 3 such feathers seen in the previous games, and the Paracel ability sees Kirby and Ku spin rapidly around akin to a tornado. Sadly, it doesn't last nearly as long, so it's not quite as broken in this game, but it's still pretty useful. Kine, the sunfish, has quite the upgrade, being much easier to use outside of water than in the last game. Oh, still is kind of, not quite in its element, but he's not completely useless. Burning sees him spit out a ring of fire. Ice sees him turn into an immobile, invincible block of ice that slams into the ground and freezes all it touches. It will slide if done while dashing. Needle sees Kine become a spiny fish, very similar to base Needle Kirby in all honesty. Spark sees Kine summon a light bulb that, in addition to harming foes, can light dark areas, revealing symbols and hidden doors. Cutter sees Kine shoot out a crescent-shaped laser that shrinks as it travels farther. Paracel has Kine face up with a large umbrella appearing from the mouth, slowing the fall and killing foes above him. Stone is basically the same as base stone, except that Kine is stuck to it. Last but not least, we got Clean, where a plunger comes out of Kine's mouth that enemies will get stuck to and can be pushed into other enemies or launched as projectiles. Now let's go to the last of the returning Old Guard. We got Rick the Hamster. With Burning, he breathes a flamethrower, sort of akin to fire seen in previous games. Ice sees a small snowball appear around Kirby. Rick can't move in this form, though. He means it's very limited in its utility, kind of like the freeze ability in all honesty. Paracel sees him balance Kirby on an umbrella on his nose, impressive. There's Cutter, which sees Rick toss Kirby like a boomerang. Stone is really useful. Seeing Kirby balance on top of Rick, who becomes a giant rolling boulder, which destroys any enemies that get in its way. Needle sees Rick grow spines from his rear end. Spark sees Rick use a whip of energy akin to the beam ability seen in other games. And last but not least, with Clean, Rick attacks from the front with a blue feather duster that harms foes. Rick also negates ice physics, which can be very useful in the fifth and final stage, Iceberg. But honestly, his lack of flight does make him a bit more awkward to use compared to Ku or, frankly, a lot of the other, friends. But now let's go on to the new guys. Starting with Naga the cat, on the base level, I love this guy. He's like a stronger Rick, being unable to fly but can perform a triple jump, which is always cool in a platformer. Starting with Burning, Kirby breathes out a flame that travels along the ground akin to napalm, shrinking as it goes forwards. With Ice Kirby, Kirby breathes snowballs beneath him that freezes enemies down beneath him, while also slightly propelling them upwards in a slow manner. Spark sees Nago rub Kirby, creating static energy that can be held down to increase the charge strength before having to be recharged. Stone sees Kirby change into a stone, which Nago pounds the ground with. Cutter sees Kirby being swung upwards quickly, creating a crescent of blast shaped energy bolt that flies diagonally into the sky. Needle sees Kirby launch pink spines forward, which is neat, but he is immobile while doing it. Paracel sees him use the umbrella as a pogo stick, and finally Clean sees Nago sweep the floor with Kirby, literally. Now let's go on to the next new guy, Pitch, the warbling white-eye, or as I'm just going to call him Pitch the bird. With Burning, Pitch flies like a fireball before returning to Kirby, which can be dodged, leaving him circling fireball type shield that orbits Kirby. Ice sees Pitch turning into a snow making machine, not that different from, base Ice Kirby. Spark sees Pitch turn into a drone that can pass through walls, annoy neighbors, and kill any in its path. With Stone, Kirby and Pitch leap into the air. The latter becomes a rock, squishing foes beneath them. Cutter sees Pitch thrown like a boomerang, with Needle having Pitch peck into the air, going in a straight line until it hits a foe. Using Paracel, Kirby basically uses the umbrella like a golf club to hit Pitch into enemies. Holding the Y button for longer will impact the angle, and finally we get Clean as Pitch is turned into a bucket that tosses water on enemies. The angle can be altered with the up D-pad. Pitch is honestly somewhat of a strange case, being the most interesting visually of the new friends, so small that Kirby is the one wielding him, and can fit in gaps that are too small for the others. But at the same time, some of the combinations can be a bit finicky to utilize, but his needle ability stands out compared to the other friends, honestly. Last but not least, we got Choo Choo the Octopus. With Burning, she and Kirby become essentially a hot air balloon. With Ice, Kirby produces snowballs, which Choo Choo tosses at enemies that freeze them in various arcs. With Spark, Choo Choo shoots a laser beam that can rebound off walls akin to the laser ability. Stone sees Kirby become a rock, which Choo Choo then swings around like a ballerina. Cutter sees Kirby swinging Choo Choo around like an axe. Needle sees Choo Choo shooting out 5 needles which hurt enemies. Very fascinating. Paracel sees her and Kirby spin around in a paracel. And lastly, Clean sees Choo Choo and Kirby fly on a broom, leaving a trail of magical residue that harms enemies. Choo Choo can also slow down their fall, but not fly, and can climb on the ceilings, which is very situational but interesting to see. Now, a lot of people consider this whole setup of abilities to be quite a step down from Kirby Superstar, but I disagree. I think it's different, but not bad. It's sort of its own separate design ethos and take on the concept. Clearly, they wanted to evolve from Dreamland 2. Plus, it's just not all so simple. The game being on SNES allows for more nuanced gameplay than the Game Boy could ever achieve. Plus, when you consider all the combinations, there's a total of 49 abilities, which is a lot and can be fun to experiment with the various combinations. In addition to the main game, there are three sub games MG5 or Minigame 5, which is a collection of five minigames once experienced through the game. I'll be going more into detail with said minigames in a bit, but they're relevant to completion requirements, and as is this sub game. Of course, there's, boss endurance, which is a boss rush, and finally jump, where you have to time a jump to land on a space with a happy face. Otherwise, if you land on an enemy, you lose, and you got to do that a number of times for 100% completion. But now, let us go on from the gameplay onto the presentation, starting with the first half, that being the graphics, and how have those stood the test of time. Alright, so I'm not going to beat around the bush. This game's graphics are just astounding. Thanks to the technique I discussed earlier, it looks really smooth and just resembles one of those, crayon drawings you'd see in old fashioned children's books, really painterly, which works for Kirby. Indeed, I'd go as far to say that this may well be the best looking game on the SNES period, though that could be a bit controversial. The graphics are just really impressive. So many little details in the background and animations. All the enemies and characters you face/encounter leave something to the mind. Though, since we shall discuss both, later in the video, instead, let's talk about the worlds. Each opens with a cute little cutscene that, while not related to the plot, which is why I didn't discuss them, are all super adorable. Grasslands is your typical green greens type thing, but has a more rugged landscape in general, and a pretty significant cave section, as well as some deep wood exploration, avoids it from being generic. Ripple Field is a tropical beach region with a coral reef section, a deep sea stage, and a sort of abandoned Atlantis-style Roman city. Sand Canyon is sort of a desert that combines aspects from the deserts of North America, especially in the rock formations and cacti, and Egypt, with a large Egyptian pyramid and a volcano of all things. Cloudy Park is filled with a lot of cloudy levels that take place in the air and has the most, chill feeling of all the levels. The same could not be said, ironically enough, of the iceberg. This level, in addition to having highly exaggerated varied topography and a wide sea, you go through several icy palaces, a side-scrolling chilly storm section before facing deity in his dark castle. And then you got Hyperzone, which is the sort of realm of madness Cthulhu type location, and it is a reference to Hyperzone, a rail shooter that was made by HAL Laboratory in 1991. Overall, the graphics are astounding. The only thing I have an issue with in terms of visuals is that sometimes the cute visuals sort of undermine the feeling. Like the quote unquote bad ending doesn't hit you in the same way that it did in Kirby's Dream Land 2, but still it's pretty good. Now let's go on to the other half of the presentation, that being the music. How has that aged? Alright, so in regards to the music, you get some returning tracks such as Gourmet Race, heard in such stages as the second one from Sand Canyon, and man is it high pitched in this game. Dee Dee's theme is back, and man, the remix scene here is really stellar. As for the original music, it's all pretty neat. The intro music is really dreamy, like, well, a dream that fits Kirby. The title is really upbeat and short, getting you pumped up for the adventure. I mean, even the file select music is good. Gosh. Grassland's first stage is a happy, cheerful song that starts with a minor intro akin to Green Greens before going into a main melody involving E flat major. It returned to Kirby 64 and Kirby Star Allies, but otherwise is often slept on. Grassland's second stage has a sound more inspired by flutes, it seems, and has sadly never returned in the series. Grassland's third stage theme is a very fast one. With high tempo, it has returned both in Kirby's Air Ride and Kirby's Squeak Squad. The Plain stage, also called a Grassland Stage 4, is a strange 16-bit attempt at jungle music, which is like reggae but in the UK, primarily in C key. It was mostly forgotten but did appear in Kirby Star Allies. Ripple Field's Ocean Wave does give off a similar vibe to the Float Islands theme from the original Kirby's Dream Land, which makes sense as they were both composed by Jun Ishikawa, who did great work for this game. I still think it stands out due to the unique music arrangement made for the game. Ripple Field's second theme doesn't have an intro and goes into a melody which has a real wave theme. Ripple Field's Stage 3 theme sounds like it was recorded in the cave, but not in a way that it's bad, more that it just works really well. It's also one that strangely seems to have been forgotten, but did appear in one future game. The desert stage theme seen in the sixth stage of the Sand Canyon and the third stage of Iceberg has some of the only instances of a 3/4 signature in the musical score for the game. It really has a tonal instability that gives off a sort of mythical Arabian Nights vibe. The Cloudy Park theme is similar to Grassland stage theme, but a bit slower and more drawn out. The last Iceberg is a really strong tonal shift from the rest of the OST, with a drum and bass feeling, and a heavy emphasis on percussion. It's a very serious tone that makes you sort of scared of what's about to happen. It returned most prominently in Kirby's Return to Dreamland. Stage Comical is a stage theme from Sand Canyon that, true to its name, is actually rather unserious tone to it, with a dominant F major and a melody spanning into a higher pitched set of instruments. It's a good song, but never returned outside of a brief segment in Kirby and the Rainbow Chorus, which I will review in time. And lastly, there is the music tracks for Dark Matter and Zero. Dark Matter's theme has a very ominous opening, but quickly shifts back to a techno beat. That is honestly not my favorite. I much prefer the Dark Matter theme in the original Kirby's Dream Land 2. The Versus Zero theme is really odd. Not very dramatic or really, intimidating. It's just really unsettling, which works for reasons that I shall return to in a bit. Overall, the OST of this game is pretty solid. While perhaps not as groundbreaking as the visuals or as notable as, say, Kirby Superstar, I still think it sounds really good. Now, however, let's discuss the enemies that Kirby must face on his adventures in this game. Alright, so starting with the common copyability list enemies, we see several returning foes including Waddle Dee, Gordo, Icicle, Glunk, Coconut, Cappy, Bronto Burt, Bouncy, Blipper, Squishy, and Kaboo. Propeller is another returning enemy, but it's been altered to such a point that it's actually rather interesting. Firstly, there are now 5 variants, and depending on which color it is, it will chase after particular animal friends much faster. The yellow one goes after Rick, the blue one goes after Kine, the brown one goes after Nago, the pink one goes after Choo Choo, and the black one goes after Koo. And Strangely enough, Pitch is the only animal friend that none of the propellers really act in any regards to. That's kind of odd, I guess. And also, two other returning enemies are Poppy Brothers Jr. and Nuruff. As for new regular enemies, well, first off, there's a variant of the Waddle Dee that rides in a cute little boat. Then there is Apollo, these strange traffic cone slash candy corn looking enemies that circularly rotate around trees and pillars. You know, strangely, eating one of these critters gets him healed by 1 HP. Badoot is a bat that will fly in the general direction of Kirby. Strangely, it doesn't really have contact damage, it actually has to bite you. There's Batamon, which is this really strange entity that may or may not be the same race as Kirby, which usually hangs out in parts of the level you can't reach, like an off-brand Missing No, except in Stage 3 of Cloudy Park. There's a hidden passageway that you can find him in. Big Kaboo is a bigger variant of Kaboo that shoots Kaboos at the player. Future games would call this guy Dekaboo. Como is a spider, relatively rare. It will drop down on string and occasionally shoot a web at Kirby, but can easily be defeated by a direct hit or cutting the string, causing him to fall to his death. Korori is a penguin that pushes a snowball down a Kirby. Gabon is a creature that wears a creepy skull and will chuck bones at Kirby, but is, just a harmless gumdrop when enough damage destroys its skull. It's most well known for the anime episode 46 Prediction Predicament Part 2 that it appeared in. Dogon is a caveman like creature that can use its club to bounce projectiles spat out at him, but can be beaten with many abilities rather easily. Doka is a small mole guy that uses its shovel to dig up rocks and toss them at Kirby. There's Joe, a shark, Caney, a crab, a Loud, which is a cloud, Mariel, a very creepy looking spider, Madhu, a magician that sort of resembles Magalore and will toss dark energy orbs at Kirby. Pretty easy to dodge due to being slow, but they can destroy certain otherwise entirely invincible blocks that can reveal hidden goodies. There's Mapu, who is a sort of icy sphere, Money and Ammonite, Nido, a blob that pretends to be a doorway, Oroa, this sandlug sort of sand thing that will hide until Kirby comes up, Pacto, a floating yellow critter that will try and eat Kirby and looks like Pac-Man. There's Passera, which is a cotton ball that breaks into smaller ones if Kirby tries to inhale or attack it. Paran is a green guy that peeks from the background and can be defeated by bumping into him. There's Polofik, a rabbit thing that only appears once and shows the location of a hidden door in the first stage of Sand Canyon. Popon is this green slime creature that can grow taller up to 5 times and is most iconic for the anime episode it appears in, that being episode 11, the Big Taste Test. Paterin is a pterosaur. Yabon is a sort of barbarian with a bow and arrow that kind of looks like Tough. Zebon is this sort of green orb that acts like a canyon. There's this really creepy face called Pelu, which, I don't know, that's pretty disturbing and tries to lick Kirby. And last but not least, there is Wapod, a ghostly Waddle Dee apparition that appears out of a jar. Now, moving on to the common enemies with abilities, we see the returning Chili, Rocky, Sir Kibble, and Sparky, who give Ice, Rock, Cutter, and Spark. We also see Broom Hatter return, but in this time it gives the ability Clean. There's also a whole menagerie of new guys, including the Dragon Galbo, that gives Burning, and Tick that gives Needle, that will become mainstays. Others were not so lucky. These included Babo, which gives the Spark ability and will shoot a electric attack at Kirby in a straight line and it looks like a pufferfish. There's Bobo, the fireball that gives burning, and Mago, the magma ball that gives the same. Gansan, a trio of rocks that rolls down at Kirby. Kapar, a kappa that throws its hat at Kirby and gives Cutter. Keke, a cat witch girl that just flies around and gives clean. Klinkoa, a sort of straw umbrella that hops around and gives parasol. Talgoza, a small enemy that looks like a spiny from Mario that gives needle. Obviously, and there's Wappa, a Yeti-like being that can roll down hills and gives ice. Over there's also Boten, the sort of cactus thing that gives, you know, needle. The last copy ability bearing enemy, which is new, is very unique, that being Bukaset. This strange little white knight creature is very interesting because it can grant every single one of the abilities in the game depending on what it's wielding. If it's wielding a blade of fire, it gives burn. It can carry a broom, which will give clean. It will carry a staff with a green tip that fires a crescent-shaped projectiles and will give cutter. With ice, it wields a blade of ice that launches ice crystals. With needle, it wields a sort of a spike. Paracel, it wields a paracel. Spark, it wields a staff with a yellow tip that, generates electric blasts. And Stone sees it carry a club made of rock. This is a very interesting concept that I wish the Kirby games did more of. One enemy can give multiple different copy abilities depending on the context. Overall, there are some interesting additions and some that are honestly a bit less so and have been forgotten to time. Let us now go on to the mini bosses. There are 6 in total, 3 returning and 3 new. Starting with the returning ones, there is Blocky, a square gray block entity that will try to attack Kirby or jump on him, trying to, kill him, which leaves behind boulders Kirby can suck up and spit back out at him that give stone. Captain Stitch, not that one, is a large Gordo-like entity that shoots its needles at Kirby. It's invincible when they're on, so you gotta time when you exactly hit it. Honestly, it seems like it would be very hard, but it's actually relatively easy. And it gives needle. Jumper Shoot is another mini boss that will attack Kirby in 2 ways. One is to spin like a top at Kirby, and the second is to kick a sandal at him. It's arguably visually the most original of all the mini bosses, being inspired by the Kasa Obake, a umbrella yokai from Japanese folklore, and the name comes from a bumbershoot, a slang term for umbrella. Now, going on to the 3 new mid bosses, honestly, 2 are pretty much meh in terms of design and fight. Bobu is a larger Bobo that can dash at Kirby and body slam at him, and you gotta suck up the embers that result and shoot them back at him. Gives burning, obviously, and is pretty forgettable. Habuki is just a broom with eyes, but has a more erratic fight that involves him sweeping the ground and leaping, generating dust clouds that must be inhaled and shot back at him. Lastly, we got Yuki, which is a large snowman guy that greatly resembles that one enemy, Flurry, from Super Mario Brothers 2. Honestly, kind of uninteresting design-wise. It actually has a interesting 3 forms of attack. First, he is able to form, 3 large jumps in a row, slide across the ground at Kirby in a straight line, and toss the head at Kirby, all of which leave behind small snowballs, which Kirby can suck up to spit back out of him, and gives freeze. Honestly, all the mini bosses are neat, though honestly some are pretty easy and visually kind of forgettable. Now let's go on to the bosses of the game, which there are a step up in every regard from the mini bosses. Starting with, of course, Wispy Woods. His first phase is pretty fine as he stands in place and shoots out various vegetables, including apples, that Kirby must suck up and spit back out. The second phase is where it gets really strange, as he starts chasing after Kirby, uprooting himself with a demonic face. It's not that much harder, but it's definitely, stands out from some of the other early Wispy Woods fights in the series. The second boss is Acro, an orca. Get it? The name is inverted, which has 2 phases. One on land where it tries to charge into Kirby, and you gotta trick it into making it charge into the wall, which causes, some debris to fall down, which can then be inhaled and spat back at him. In the second phase, he swims around while spitting various things at Kirby, which can be spat back at him using Kirby's water gun or another ability. The third world's boss is Pawn the Raccoon and Con the Fox. They function a lot like Norf and Nelly, with the two running back and forth, accompanied by smaller members of their species that can be inhaled and spat out. Meanwhile, occasionally, a large Gordo like a bomb will fall down. It's fun, but in terms of difficulty, it's actually somewhat between Wispy and Acro, being actually easier than Acro in some ways. The fourth boss, Addo, is notable for a few reasons. First, there's some debate on whether he/she is the same as Adeline the Painter Girl, who appears in Kirby 64 and much later games. Personally, I think she inspired that character, but I don't think they were initially meant to be the same. Otherwise, they would have just reused the name Addo. Just seems like a reused concept that was given, more fleshing out. While she's not much more than a pushover herself, she creates a series of paintings that are nostalgic callbacks to previous games, though. Given how old this game is, are they really nostalgic? I don't know. Something introduced in this game and would become a common trope in Kirby games going forwards. First is Ice Dragon from Dreamland 2, which attacks via ice breath, spitting out ice cubes which are then can be inhaled and spat back out at it. It's fun, but not that hard. Then we have a sweet stuff, which is a pathetic now that it's on land as opposed to water, it can only slowly hop forwards. You gotta shoot starfish at it that it releases, and it will also shoot lightning orbs at Kirby. And you can suck up the starfish, as I said before, and spit back out at the fish. Then we got Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright from Kirby's Adventure. The fight is similar to that scene in that game. They take turns fighting. One will go into the air and provide support for the other. Both will charge, but Mr. Shine throws a boomerang while Mr. Bright shoots a fireball. They are slower and a little easier than that game, but still relatively bit of a challenge. Last but not least, we got Kracko from the original Dreamland, which shoots lightning bolts, flies around, and releases smaller copies called Co-Crackos that can be sucked up and shot back at him. Honestly, this is a pretty fun boss and set the groundwork for many even better bosses in the future. So it's a neat concept, having her paint previous, encounters. Then, of course, we see the encounter with none other than DDD. The first phase is, your typical sort of DDD fight. He'll try to lunge at Kirby, jumping around to crush him, and will occasionally try and slam his hammer down at Kirby. But the second phase is where things get weird. First, he starts floating in the air. In this, stage, his chest opens into a mouth like that scene from The Thing and tries to bite Kirby or shoot a black orb at Kirby. It's honestly kind of creepy, though admittedly the art style doesn't really help that. The pre-ultimate boss is Dark Matter. Unlike last time, though, he only has a single phase, so sadly no cool swordsman. It shoots black orbs from its eyes that are made of dark energy and orange orbs. It's basically the second phase from Kirby's Dream Land 2, but with more health. But last and certainly not least, we have the encounter with Zero. This white orb with a bloodshot eye will attack in two ways. One, it will shoot small dark matter orbs as projectiles, and the second of these attacks is that it will cut itself, you know, seeing it squirt blood at Kirby, which is just really creepy and kind of unsettling. The second phase sees his eye bloodily rip itself out of its body and begin chasing it, Kirby, in such a very creepy manner. It was so bloody that when the game was re-released in the Dream Collection, it gave that game an ESRB rating of everyone 10 plus. Oh, and it'll also occasionally charge you, but that's not very common in my experience. It definitely stands out due to the visuals really strongly contrasting with the rest of the game, and is a pretty decent challenge for the last of all encounters. It also was hinted at as soon as the first cutscene if you pay attention. Now that we've discussed the enemies that Kirby faces, let us move on to the completion requirements and my final thoughts. Now, in order to 100% complete this game, you gotta first get all the heart stars from the sages, which can be broadly divided into several groups, though I shall briefly discuss each level. I just want to say that you will notice patterns as you play. The first stage of each world involves a flower of some sort. Grassland, there is a tulip that you have to help by not hopping or harming on any of his tulip friends. With Ripplefield, he has a rockbell flower that you gotta help out by using the pitch and clean combination to water all of the flowers that he's friends with. You know, pretty easy, but, makes sense. In Sand Canyon, you gotta help a mushroom by engaging in a mass slaughter of red tulips to get the heart star. Cloudy Park has a pseudo fire flower. Yes, it's a reference to the Mario power up that you gotta help by cleaning the soot using the clean combination with either Ku or Rick off his friends. And Iceberg has a daisy that you gotta help out by using the burning ability to unfreeze his friends. Honestly, these guys are pretty easy, but it makes sense being that the first ones in every world. The next group of levels includes you bringing either a specific friend or ability combination to the end of the stage. In Greenland Stage 2, you got Mushi Mushi that you gotta take Choo Choo to in order for her to slap him, apparently turning him on to get the Heart Star. Stage 5 of Grassland has Mine the Sunfish that you gotta bring her husband Kind to. Ripplefield Stage 2 has Bakasa, which you gotta bring a kind and the parasol together in order to get the Heart Star. And Stage 5 of Ripplefield, you got Pitch's mom that you gotta bring, obviously, Pitch to. Sand Canyon has Yupon, a yellow octopus that you gotta also bring Choo Choo to. Cloudy Park has Pick the Hamster that you gotta bring Rick to. And last but not least, there was Shiro the Cat, which you gotta bring Nago to. But since he's not in the stage, it's the hardest to get in Iceberg Stage 5, as you have to go to a past level to get Nago. The next set of characters where you gotta do a task within the level to complete in order to get their heart star is the smallest category. Ripplefield 6 has HB002 that you have to destroy a set of blocks in order to resemble a creature, which is a squared diamond shape. Sand Canyon Stage 2 has a character named Obachan that you must use the clean ability to clean up dust in the level to get the Heart Star. Cloudy Park Stage 2 sees Kirby having to help out a chicken mom named Kiko be reunited with his chick by popping a balloon with the needle ability. Cloudy Park Stage 6 has HB0707, which is similar to a previous blob creature except shaped in a vase shape. Iceberg Stage 2 sees Kirby helping Samus Aran dealing with Metroids, deadly space parasites that Kirby is completely immune to, just being tickled by them, which is astounding if you know anything about him. You gotta use ice on them to beat him, which makes sense. Pretty strange encounter, all things considered. The second to last category of heart stars is where you gotta bring items collected in the stage to somebody. Grassland Stage 4 has a girl named Cow, where you must gather her monkey friend Goku via a secret alternative pathway that can be achieved from breaking a bridge made out of blocks that can be destroyed with stone. Pierre in Grassland Stage 6 has you see him bring three shapes that he juggles. Ripple Field Stage 4 sees you reuniting this mama toad with her baby toad using the needle ability gained via a hidden door at the end of a scrolling section in a dark tower. Sand Canyon Stage 4 sees Hikari, where you gotta reunite her with the boy Donbay, found via going down a set of tunnels. Sand Canyon Stage 6 sees you collecting pieces of Rob for Professor Hector. Cloudy Park Stage 4 sees Kirby reuniting Kokogami Moki with Mikarin with the help of Ku. Iceberg Stage 4 sees Kirby using Burning Leo and Ku uh, helping Name Magi get this shell back. And most complex, we got Iceberg Stage 6, where you gotta help an angel get their wings back by collecting 8 feathers, using all of the abilities in the right order, which, if you're curious, is Spark, Stone, Paracel, Ice Cutter, Clean, Burn, and lastly, Needle. The last group of heart stars are what in my opinion, the most complex, and I call them the mini-game set, as they're mechanically the most complex and annoying. Grassland has Pitchermon, who has the Which Goro Was Thrown minigame, which sees him toss a metal ball between two rocky formations, which forms into a Gordo that is visible for only a brief moment. You must then guess what face this, Gordo was. Do it 3 times and you win. Ripplefield has Allele, which is an enemy from Dreamland 2, and sees him play the game Where the Eel, which you have to guess which one of the pots he is in after he shuffles between them very fast. It gets faster and faster each round, and if you get all 3 correct, you win. Sand Canyon Stage 3 has Scaramello, which you have to guess how many specific faces of Gordors there are from a group that is briefly seen. Cloudy Park Stage 3 with Tamashan is similar, but you gotta guess how many of a specific colored Gordo there is in a group. Lastly, in Iceberg Stage 3, we have Kawasaki, who tosses out 5 Gordos, each of which will make a specific sound. Kawasaki will then pull out a 6th Gordo and hit it with his pan, releasing a specific sound that you have to match one of the previous Gordos. And you must pick the right one 3 times. Outside of the last one, they're not that hard, especially if you use like an iPhone to take a picture of them. But they're really annoying because if you mess up, you gotta replay the entire stage for a second attempt, which can get very irritating. The remaining requirements for 100% completion include beating the boss rush. You then have to beat MG5, which is a minigame compilation where you got to beat all the minigames at once, which can get really, really annoying. And from there, you unlock the final part, which is the jumping minigame. This jumping game gets increasingly hard as there are less of those safe spaces you can jump onto. You gotta get a score of 10 in order to quote unquote complete this game. Overall, this is another solid game in the Kirby series. While yes, the copyabilities can be considered somewhat of a downgrade, I think more simply a different take on the concept. And equally valid, if not perhaps as flexible, but it's still fun to experiment with. The story is a fun evolution of the setting, and the graphics and music are just astounding in my eyes. Honestly, this is another game worth playing, but if I'm being completely honest, don't feel as pressured to 100% complete it compared to others unless you really like the mini games and have a deep level of patience. And there are multiple ways that you can play it. There's, of course, the original SNES release. There was the Virtual Console released on the Wii for, English countries in January 5th, 2009, and then in Japan on April 28th, 2009, and in the EU and Australia in July 24th, 2009. Then there was the Kirby's Dream Collection Special Edition, which I discussed earlier, that was released in Japan on July 19th, 2012, and September 16th, 2012 in the US and Canada. And then there was the Virtual Console for the Wii U, where it was released May 8th on 2013 in both Japan and US and Canada, while the EU and Australia in July 25th, 2013. And most recently, there is the SNES Nintendo Switch Online service, which was released on September 6th in Japan 2019, September 5th in the US and Canada, and again on September 6th for the EU and Australia. Anyway, I'm the Dark Master. If you liked this video, liked it. But if you loved it, consider liking and subscribing. And join me next time on my Kirby reviews. Have a wonderful day. Take care. Peace out.